It was supposed to be an ordinary night. No warnings. No screams. No signs that anything was about to go terribly wrong. An 84-year-old woman went home after spending time with family, just like she had done countless times before. The lights were off. The neighborhood was quiet. And by morning, she was gone. No phone. No trace. And what investigators found outside her home would turn a missing person case into something far darker. Because this wasn't just someone who walked away. Something happened in the middle of the night. And the most chilling part? Someone may have been watching, waiting, long before anyone realized she was in danger. Nancy Guthrie, a mother, a grandmother, a woman known for her quiet life, suddenly became the center of a nationwide investigation. Security cameras stopped working. Blood was discovered outside the house. And then, messages began to appear. Messages that raised more questions than answers. Was this a kidnapping? A planned crime? Or something even more disturbing? As days passed, the search only grew larger. The FBI stepped in. Billboards appeared across cities. And her family made an emotional plea, begging for her safe return. But with every passing hour, one question kept getting louder. What really happened the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared? Because sometimes, the scariest stories begin in complete silence. And this one is far from over. Nancy Guthrie was not someone who lived a public life. At 84 years old, she lived quietly in the Catalina foothills area near Tucson, Arizona. Her days were predictable, peaceful, and routine, the kind of routine that makes sudden disappearances even more unsettling. She was last seen on the evening of January 31, 2026, after spending time with family before returning home. Nothing seemed unusual. No reports of fear. No indication that anything was wrong. But sometime after midnight, something changed. Investigators later revealed that security systems around her home showed unusual activity during the early morning hours. A doorbell camera was disconnected. Motion was detected outside. And then, silence. By the next morning, Nancy didn't show up where she was expected to be. That alone raised concern. Friends contacted family members. When relatives arrived at her home, what they found immediately felt wrong. Her personal belongings were still inside. Her phone hadn't moved. And there were disturbing signs that suggested she didn't leave willingly. Authorities quickly shifted the case from a simple missing persons search to something more serious, a potential crime scene. That moment changed everything. Because when investigators begin treating a home as a crime scene, it means one thing. They believe a crime may have already happened. And now, the clock was ticking. As news spread, the case began attracting national attention. Nancy Guthrie wasn't just anyone, she was the mother of a well-known television anchor, and suddenly millions of people were following the story. Search teams expanded. Drones, helicopters, and federal agents joined the investigation. Authorities believed she may have been taken against her will. And then came the detail that made the situation even more frightening. Nancy depended on daily medication. Meaning time wasn't just important, it was critical. Every hour without answers increased the urgency. Every new lead created hope, and then uncertainty. Because in cases like this, silence can mean many things. Sometimes it means the trail has gone cold. And sometimes, it means someone is trying very hard not to be found. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance was no longer being treated as a simple missing person case. Investigators now believe that whatever happened that night was deliberate. And that single realization changed the direction of everything. Because when someone disappears without taking their phone, their medication, or even their keys, it usually means they didn't plan to leave at all. Neighbors were questioned one by one. Some reported hearing nothing unusual. No loud noises. No struggle. Just another quiet night. And that silence itself became unsettling. Because crimes that happen without sound are often the ones planned in advance. Investigators began piecing together the last confirmed hours of Nancy's evening. She had returned home normally. There were no signs she expected visitors. No messages suggesting fear. And yet, sometime after midnight, movement was detected around the property. Then suddenly, nothing. The doorbell camera stopped recording. Motion alerts ended. And from that moment forward, Nancy Guthrie simply vanished. For investigators, this raised a disturbing possibility. Someone may have known exactly when to approach the house. Someone who understood her routine. Someone who knew when she would be alone. And that possibility made the case far more complicated. As the search widened, law enforcement brought in additional resources. Search teams combed nearby areas. Helicopters scanned open land. Every lead, no matter how small, was followed. Because in the early days of a disappearance, even the smallest detail can change everything. But days began to pass. And with each passing day, the questions only grew louder. Why was there no clear trail? Why had no one reported seeing anything unusual? And most importantly, if this was an abduction, why hadn't anyone come forward? Then reports emerged that investigators were examining communications connected to the case. Messages that needed verification. Messages that created hope for some, and fear for others. Because in cases like this, not every message is real. And sometimes false leads waste the most valuable thing investigators have: time. Meanwhile, Nancy's family faced something even more painful. Waiting. Public appeals were made, asking anyone with information to come forward. The emotional weight of uncertainty began to show. When families speak publicly during investigations, it often means one thing: they are running out of answers. And yet, the investigation continued to move quietly behind the scenes. Authorities examined surveillance footage from nearby streets. Vehicles were identified and cleared one by one. Hours of recordings were reviewed frame by frame. Investigators searched for anything unusual: a car slowing down, headlights appearing at the wrong time, a shadow moving where it shouldn't. Because sometimes the truth appears for only a few seconds, and then disappears forever. As national attention grew, the case began to reach people far beyond the local community. Tips started coming in from across the country. Some useful, many not. But every call had to be checked. And still, no confirmed sighting. That absence of evidence created an uncomfortable reality. Either the person responsible had made very few mistakes, or the most important clue had not yet been discovered. And that's when investigators began focusing on a difficult question. Was Nancy the intended target? Or was this a crime of opportunity that suddenly went wrong? The difference between those two possibilities matters. Because one suggests planning, and the other suggests unpredictability. Both are dangerous in different ways. As the days turned into weeks, the emotional pressure surrounding the case intensified. Media coverage increased. Experts weighed in. Former investigators pointed out how unusual it was for someone to disappear so completely without immediate evidence. And with every passing update, one detail continued to stand out. There were still more questions than answers. Some cases moved quickly. Others slow down as evidence dries up. And investigators know that the moment public attention fades is often when cases become hardest to solve. But this case refused to fade. Because somewhere out there, someone knew what happened that night. Someone knew why Nancy Guthrie never made it to the next morning. And until that person speaks, the mystery remains unfinished. Agar Cheho to main of next part continue Karan Jahan investigation or intense Hodi Hai, timeline break Hodi Hai, or story emotional peak ki taraf Jadi Hai, same suspense flow Kusath. Days were passing, but answers were not coming. Investigators confirmed something that made the situation even more serious. Evidence at the house suggested Nancy Guthrie did not leave on her own. Authorities began treating the home as a crime scene, believing she may have been taken during the night. And that single confirmation changed how everyone looked at the case. Because when someone disappears willingly, there are usually signs. But when someone is taken, silence becomes terrifying. Search teams continued working across the area. Helicopters scanned desert land. Officers revisited the same locations again and again, hoping something had been missed. But the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the case became. There were no confirmed suspects. No clear vehicle. No witness who saw exactly what happened. Authorities later stated publicly that they still had no persons of interest, a detail that worried many people following the case. Because it meant one thing. Whoever was responsible had left very little behind. At the same time, messages began to surface. Messages that investigators said they were reviewing carefully. Some were believed to be connected to whoever claimed responsibility. The FBI became involved, analyzing every detail. For the family, hope and fear started to exist at the same time. In an emotional public appeal, Nancy's children spoke directly to whoever might be holding her, asking for her safe return. They made it clear that nothing mattered more than bringing her home alive. And that moment changed the emotional tone of the entire story. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a race against time. Nancy Guthrie depended on daily medication, and investigators openly admitted that every hour without her increased concern for her safety. The public followed every update. Candlelight vigils appeared. People who had never met her began hoping for good news. But behind the scenes, investigators faced a difficult reality. Cases like this often grow colder the longer they remain unsolved. Still, the search continued. Evidence was re-examined. Timelines were reconstructed again and again. Detectives looked at the smallest possibilities: a passing vehicle, a disconnected camera, a moment that seemed unimportant at first. Because sometimes the truth hides in seconds that nobody noticed. And yet, days later, the biggest question remained unchanged. What really happened inside that quiet house that night? Was it planned? Was it random? Or was it something far more personal than anyone realized? Authorities have said the investigation remains active. Leads are still being followed. And until answers come, the case remains open, unfinished, unresolved, and deeply unsettling. But here's the part that makes this story truly chilling. In many disappearances, there is eventually a moment when everything makes sense. A clue, a witness, a mistake that reveals the truth. This case hasn't reached that moment yet. Somewhere, someone knows what happened after midnight. Someone knows why the cameras stopped. Someone knows why an ordinary night suddenly became a national mystery. And until that person speaks, the silence remains. Because sometimes the most frightening stories don't end with answers. They end with a question that refuses to go away. What happened to Nancy Guthrie? After the lights went out that night? And maybe the most disturbing thought of all is this. The truth may already exist somewhere, waiting for the moment when it can no longer stay hidden.